Hello everyone, welcome to our presentation on ROV++, Improved Deployable Defense Against BGP Hijacking. Joining you today is me, Ronaldo, and my just as amazing colleague, Justin. And we're going to kick it off by giving you guys an intro to BGP and interdomain routing security, our motivation of ROV++, and we're going to go into our experiments and results. We're going to cover our implementation deployment in ROV++ Lite and what we work on in the future and our final conclusions. So let's give you a quick rundown on BGP to get you up to speed as quickly as possible. And we're going to touch upon the three concepts of BGP relationship and shortest path and most specific traffic routing. And we're going to do that with this lovely little topology. And the message that we want to drive home with this one is you choose customers over peers and peers over providers. And that a shorter path is a better path. Well, in this topology, we have 99 announcing this /16, and it's going to share that with 44, and 44 is going to share that with 78. And likewise, we see 99 shares that with 86, and shares that with 88. And now 78 has the dilemma of picking between the announcement for 44 and the one from 88. And it's going to pick the one that has the shorter path. Shorter path is the better path. And you can see it shows that with 12. Now let's draw attention to 87. Now you can see it receives that announcement from 86 and also from 88. But the message here is that from 86, it's a peer. So peers over providers. Hence, 87 is going to pick it from 86. Now let's make things slightly more interesting and throw an attacker into the mix. It's going to be announcing this /24, 1.23 of this 99. It's more specific. Now it's going to share that announcement, and then 44 is going to share it 78, and it's going to share that with 12. And the message that we want to drive home here today is that the closest match is the way to go. So when 12 sends traffic that's within this prefix, 24, well, it's going to follow the closest matching path, and that's going to lead us right to the attacker. Right? Now let's give you some background into routing security, or insecurity that is, because BGP has no built-in security mechanisms and has a long history of attacks like route manipulations, route leaks, and other small painful things that have been happening. And what are the defenses about this? Well, mostly ad hoc things that network operators have been doing, not really good, not very effective. But then RPK came around, and it tried to change things, and particularly to prevent hijacks, and that's going to be our focus. So let me give you a quick rundown on RPKI and ROV. So RPKI has this routing certificate that binds an IP prefix to a public key, and a route origin authorization which binds, or I should say, binds an origin and a prefix. And we call this a ROA. And the operation of checking this is route origin validation, ROV, which validates the origin in BGP announcements. It's going to check if it's invalid, it's going to drop the announcement. But unfortunately, this is not effective against all forms of attacks, which we highlight in this table. In this table where we compare ROV to ROV++, that's us, against the hijacks types of subprefix and non-routed superprefix hijack. And as you can see, ROV++ simply demolishes ROV, and at low adoption. So how does ROV fail? How is this happening? So let's draw your attention to this topology. We have this is very similar to what we showed earlier, so now we have this additional branch and an AS missing. That's okay. So now we have 77, 78, they're ROV ASes, they're implementing ROV. It's going to see that this subprefix announced /24 of this /16 is being announced, and then 44 is going to share that with them. And these as ROV ASes are going to recognize that this is a invalid announcement. It's going to drop it. It's not going to share it with its customers. But unfortunately, you see that only solves half the problem. When it comes time to send traffic from 11 and 12, you can see that if the 11 decides to send traffic that's within this subprefix, well, it's going to share, 77 is going to share that traffic with 44 because the closest match it has is the /16. And well, 44, because it doesn't know any better, it's going to share that with the attacker. So you can see that RP doesn't really do much in this situation. Same thing here for 12. Now, let me give you a rundown on the superprefix hijack on non-routed. But first, about non-routed prefixes. So what are they? Essentially, their prefixes are not supposed to be routed and not announced. These kind of prefixes are often used, and I should say abused, for spam and DDoS attacks, as well as other attacks. And now the superprefix hijack. So this is when the attacker announces a superprefix of a non-routed prefix. So the superprefix in this case is this /22, and the non-routed prefix in this situation is the /24. Well, the attacker is going to show the announcement 44, and then it's going to show that 77. 77 being ROV, and assuming that there is a ROA for at least the /24. Well, it's going to drop it, but more than likely there's not one for the superprefix, and that's going to come through, and oh, lo and behold, packets destined to the IP address in the non-routed prefix will be routed following the superprefix announcement directly to the attacker. Oh well. So what are our contributions? What do we do about this? So, well, ROV, it improves defenses against these particular kinds of attacks, and we also identify this non-routed superprefix attack, and we motivate the adoption of ROV and ROV++ to improve the defenses for spam and DDoS, particularly with respect to non-routed prefixes. So let's get into some motivation for ROV++, and we're going to start that off with our design goals. So we have these 5, and the first is do no harm. No hijack due to ROV++. Number 2, prevent hijacks. We want to maximize the hijack prevention without compromising connectivity that ROV otherwise would have. And then do no harm to maintain high success rate. And we want to keep it simple and make it easily deployable, which is critical for any system that actually wants to be used. So we're going to go through ROV++ by example, motivating each of its mechanisms by use case. And we're going to kick it off first with V1 by preventing visible hijacks. So this figure should look extremely familiar because we just talked about it not too long ago. So you can see how ROV only solves half the problem. And comes time for the data plane, traffic is going to get hijacked. So what can we do about that? Well, we introduced this mechanism called black holing. And the idea is that on the data plane, the traffic will be dropped. But you only create these black holes when there's no alternative safeguard to do so. And we illustrate that down here in this figure below. Now, what you see here is that we've replaced these ROV ASes with ROV++ V1 ASes. And you can see at 77 and 78, they're V1 ASes. So in 78, it's going to have this announcement from the /16 from 88 and 44. So when it comes time to decide, well, okay, do I need to black hole? It's going to say, oh, don't need to. I have a backup, a nice alternative path. So it doesn't need to black hole. But 77, oh, well, it only receives the announcement from one place, and unfortunately, it doesn't have another backup. So the only thing it can do is black hole. But at least the traffic from 11 will be saved, and including its own. Now, V2. So unfortunately, dropping announcement in black holing traffic doesn't always help. And you can see that here in this topology. So 77, similar to before, you can see, well, it recognizes that it doesn't have an alternative. It's going to create a black hole. Hooray, it saves itself. But unfortunately, that doesn't do too much for its fellow ASes, for example, here in 32 and 33. Well, is there something we can do about that? And the answer is yes, yes we can. And the enhancement for this is black hole announcements. Now, what is a black hole announcement? Well, it's essentially you continue to share the attacker's announcement, except that you carry some additional information saying that you should create a black hole when you see this. And you can see that exemplified here in this figure on the bottom right. We convert a 33 to a V2 AS. It's going to get this black hole announcement in black, and it's going to say, hey, I can create a black hole for this. And it does. And it saves itself. And not only that, this black hole announcement has a potential to have collateral benefit. You can see that with 32 still being an ROV AS. And 11 is going to see that this path from 77 is shorter. It's going to prefer that. And lo and behold, we're also saving other ASs too. Now, non-routed prefix and superprefix hijacks. So again, this figure should look very familiar. So we're not going to talk about it. But we want to talk about the defense. How do we solve this problem? Well, RPKI allows ROA to specify origin AS0 to signal a non-routed prefix. So how can ROV++ take advantage of that? Hey, we can create black holes for these, and so traffic destined to them will not be hijacked. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Justin, who's going to go over our experiments and results.
So for our experiments, we use an empirically derived internet scale AS topology from CADA, specifically the Serial 2 dataset. For ROV++ adopting ASs, the preference to routes with no black holes is placed right after local preference so that the economic interests of the AS are still considered first. We assume for our simulations that routing follows the commonly assumed value-free Gau-Rexford routing. And for our results, we measure the hijack rate, success rate, and disconnect rate. So this is a graph for all ASes, and you can see on the y-axis we have the percent hijacked on the data plane, and on the x-axis we have the percent adoption for the security policy. And as you can see, for overall, all ROV++ policies perform better than ROV and have less hijacks. If you look at this top graph here, we can see again the data plane percent hijacked. This is for adopting ASes, and we can see that the ROV++ ASes perform significantly better than ROV. With just 10% adoption, you can see probably over an 85% improvement in ROV++. You'll notice that ROV++ v2 does slightly better than ROV++ v1 due to its more aggressive black holing mechanisms. But if you look at the bottom left graph, you can see that it has a lower successful connection rate. And if you look at the bottom right graph, it has a higher disconnect rate. For the non-adopting ASes, again, we can see if you look at the top graph for the percent hijacked that there is collateral benefit for all ROV++ policies, and the collateral benefit is greater than ROV. For the non-routed prefixes, we can see here that ROV++ v2 performs better than v1 due to its more aggressive mechanisms, which are okay here because it's a non-routed prefix. We can see the same thing for a superprefix hijack. Again, ROV++ v2 performs better than ROV++ v1. As far as our recommended implementation for subprefix hijacks, we recommend using ROV++ v1 because it performs better than ROV, whereas ROV++ v2, while it may perform better, it is too aggressive for a routed prefix and has other drawbacks that we discussed in the paper. For hijacks involving non-routed prefixes, we recommend ROV++ v2 since it has a lower hijack rate for non-adopting ASes due to its more aggressive black holing, and we have much more graphs, figures, and discussions in the paper. And now I will pass it back to Ronaldo.
Thanks, Justin. And let's revisit our design goals. Essentially, what I'm going to show here is that we've checked off all our boxes, except now we're going to talk about easy to deploy, which is critical when we want to actually use this. Now, implementation, deployment, and ROV++ Lite. So unfortunately, as ROV++ stands by itself, it requires changes to the router, which does not forego well for something that wants to be actually used. So we want to design ROV++ that removes this requirement by removing any changes to the preference mechanism to make it easier to deploy and implement. And we simulated this change and see if it has any significant impact on the performance of their defenses. So we can see here in this graph where we compare V1 Lite and V1, and we can see that the Lite version is on par with its non-Lite counterpart. And this is great news, and this is also true for the other versions. And this means that our recommendations for their non-Lite counterparts still hold for our Lite ones. So their performance is about the same. Now let's talk about our future works and conclusions. So we intend to do some mixed deployment scenarios or simulations where we have ROV and ROV++ coexisting in the same graph. And we want to explore some extensions of ROV that will provide defenses even at adoption where it's only at the edge ASes, or at least mostly. And now let's wrap everything up and say, hey, we've created ROV++, an extension of ROV that significantly reduces rates in subprefix hijacks, especially at low adoption, and explored superprefix hijacks and analyzed its effectiveness against ROV and ROV++, and raise the awareness of the security limitations of ROV and motivate further studies on these limitations. Thank you for joining us today, and have a great day.
And if you are interested in reading more about it, there's a lot more detailed discussion and results in our paper.
Thank you.